The biggest splashes the Texans can make and why getting into free agency aggressively might be the worst move possible. Let's go inside the locker room.
Yeah, it's the locker room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it.
Good luck.
Locker room, yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize, every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too.
It's free agency setting teams up for disaster. It is the locker room number one source for Texans digital content. It is Combine week. I'll be at the Combine in a couple of days. Had some personal stuff to where the journey pushed back a day or so, but all is well. And what a time to be alive. What a time to cover the team. Coming up later on in the show, I don't know what the hell they're doing in Jacksonville, but it keeps getting weirder and weirder. We'll go through the potential biggest splashes that the Texans can make. But I kind of want to touch on this free agency thing because when it comes to the Texans, when it comes to free agency, when it comes to this time of the year, I think the guy who most people respect at a high level and most people that follow the Texans closely respect at an even higher level is Daniel Jeremiah. Daniel Jeremiah was the guy who on draft day of 2023, he had the CJ Stroud selection, and then he had the Texans trading up for Will Anderson at 3. And he's just kind of been on top of this. I think he's kind of established himself with what Mayock decided to attempt to do. He's kind of established himself as like the football nerds go to when it comes to offseason talk. And rightfully so, because he does a hell of a job. And I think his mock drafts are the best mock drafts. I think his analysis is the best. That's not to say there's not other good people, but I think Daniel Jeremiah, especially in this space, in the space that we focus on here in the locker room, number one source for Texans digital content, I think he's really well respected. And he's really been harping. And he's not a guy who goes on Twitter just to harp. Usually when he goes on Twitter and he presses send or X, whatever the hell you want to call it, it's usually to provide information. It's to provide insight. It's to kind of warn you what's going on. He's not a guy who gets on soapboxes. He's not a guy who goes in rabbit holes. He's not a guy who rants, much like a lot of people, including myself, do. But he's really been pushing, and I think it's his last two tweets, that the free agency class this year basically sucks. In the nicest way he can say, Daniel Jeremiah, in his last two tweets, 12 hours ago and 10 hours ago, so at 10 a.m. and noon, he said, quote, "I've been reading about this free agency class for the last few days, and it's making me even more fired up for the NFL Scouting Combine, which is this week, which I'll be there. Cody Stoots will be there. SNL will be in the building. We got you covered." Not a lot of excitement on the used car lot this year. It's a good year to buy new. So he's basically talking about this free agent class being kind of damaged goods. Nothing really great sticks out. He follows that up 2 hours later. He says, "I'll be shocked if we don't see a flurry of extensions done over the next 7 to 10 days. Teams have money, space, and the free agent group isn't very exciting." So there he goes. He's emphasizing again, it isn't very exciting. Good time to lock up your key young guys. Now for the Texans, that would mean Derek Stingley. There's no really other options that stick out at this point, unless you want to save for CJ Stroud and Will Anderson next year. But for the Texans, that would mean Derek Stingley for the most part. But Daniel Jeremiah is making it very clear that he thinks free agency sucks this year and that there's not a lot of opportunity for teams to really improve themselves in free agency. And I tend to agree. And I tend to believe, and I know that there's all these names and there's all these guys that everyone likes to look at, and we start playing Madden and we start thinking, oh, they should sign this guy, this guy, this guy. It's not really the right way to build your team. More times than not, these top free agents, they're on the market in 3 years. And they go from being overpaid by Team A to either damaged goods the next time they hit the market, or they end up kind of, the market kind of goes down. You start getting those guys at a bargain. And that's really the dangers of trying to build your team in free agency. Now, we are going through the biggest splashes potentially. And I think the one that people keep throwing out there, and I actually saw this graphic, I think the Texans are the third team on his odds board at 2-1, behind Chicago's number one at -200, which is crazy. And the Chiefs are like even money, and the Texans are 2-1, and that would be signing Trey Smith. He's a 26-year-old guard. He's one of the best guards in the league. He did his thing in Kansas City. Kansas City's in that area right now, and this is the area the Texans are eventually going to get to, and this is why you have to be good at drafting. Every year, Kansas City is gonna lose because they do a good job of finding players. They do a good job of maximizing players, and they do a good job of not overpaying guys. Every year, Kansas City, when it comes to the highest paid free agents, they're going to be saying goodbye to someone. Last year, it was Snead. This year, it looks like it's going to be Trey Smith. And their salary cap situation is such to where it might not make sense for them. Now, you look at the teams that are connected to Trey Smith, and we know that this is kind of the week where a lot of foundation gets laid for guys to end up somewhere. So there could be anyone that ends up getting Trey Smith. You can end up at Kansas City. Who knows? But the reason Chicago is being mentioned is because Chicago's had what the Texans have had the last few years. Chicago has a quarterback on his rookie deal. Now, they probably don't feel as good about Caleb Williams after 1 year as the Texans did about C.J. Stroud. But because they have a player at the position that usually consumes the majority of the pie that is the salary cap, there's belief that they're going to try to protect that guy, and they're going to try to get a free agent to help that guy. And they might be willing to overpay that free agent because they have the money to do it, which is what the Texans had last year and the year before when they knew C.J. Stroud was going to be good, or they believed that C.J. Stroud could be their quarterback of the future. Now, the Bears. And this is the reality of the Texans situation. The Bears, instead of giving Shaq Mason a contract extension and Titus Howard a contract extension, they could essentially just say, we're going to sign Trey Smith. Pretty much the same amount of money. Actually, way less probably. Probably still go get a couple more players with that. But the Texans were in the same situation, and that's what they did. They gave Shaq Mason an extension, and they gave Titus Howard an extension. Which is why Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans, as we head into this offseason, they failed the test, but their good work has been able to mask it. Because they had young players at marquee positions, their good work has been able to mask it. And that's good news for the Texans. It's unfortunate. What's done is done, but that's just kind of where the Texans are sitting now. And that's why Chicago is probably going to be, if the Texans decide, if Nick Caserio and company, they decide, hey, we want to go get Smith, their biggest competition is going to be a team that was in the situation they were in last year. So that's where they're at. When it comes to that. Now, would it be the worst thing for them to sign Trey Smith? No. I mean, if Trey Smith truly is one of the best guards in the league, and you put that guard on the interior, and eventually you say goodbye to Shaq Mason and or Titus Howard, then you could do a lot worse. Problem is, you can't really save money heading into free agency with the way those contracts are laid out. So that's what's going to prevent you from getting Trey Smith. The Texans cap situation with what it is right now, it shouldn't be the case. They just spent very reckless money. They spent very reckless money. They basically got a $5,000 Visa gift card, and they decided to spend money at the first store that they saw that was familiar to them. Titus Howard and Shaq Mason. But because DeMeco Ryans has done a good job of coaching his defense, because Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans have done such a good job drafting, because the division sucks, if we're being honest, they've been able to overcome it. But it's what might prevent them from being as active in free agency this year. You can always make room. You can always push back the money. The cap can be manipulated. I'm not going to say the cap's fake, but that's just kind of where they are. But I could see the Smith signing, and I could see it being possible. I could see that being possible. Siraj asks a question, and it's a perfect transition. This is just kind of a dunk. Alley-oop. What's the latest on Diggs? Stefan Diggs, which is another splash that they could make. Re-signing Stefan Diggs. Now, I'm against this. There's already going to be the dead cap next year. They say it didn't surprise them. It didn't. What surprised them is the fact that Tank Dell wasn't going to be a part of their plans. So that's the surprise. That's what's tough. That's the surprise there, is that Tank Dell's not going to be a part of this. So that's the splash when it comes to when it comes to the Stefan Diggs situation and the way that they handled that. I'm against it because I think there's kind of a shelf life. I know that they all like him. I'm not questioning it. I think there's a shelf life. I think there's limitations to the game. And I think he's coming off a torn ACL. And I think he's got a lot going on, if we're being honest. Like, just go look in the news and type in Stefan Diggs. I'm not saying he's not going to be ready to go once the season starts. There's just a lot going on there. And I think some of these other guys that we'll get to in a second would be more appealing. But I don't know what the latest is. I mean, he's putting up workout videos. He's doing all types of stuff. But your guess is as good as mine. What's going to happen with Stefan Diggs is he's going to realize very quickly that this market is not going to be favorable to him. I don't know if Stefan Diggs is one of those guys who signs an early deal. And quite frankly, with how reckless the Texans have been with money, I would probably not be too overly aggressive to sign Stefan Diggs. I don't know what they're going to do. I know that there have been a couple of guys who've said we'd like to have him back. I don't know if they didn't want to bring him back. I don't know that they would say different. But the reality is, you ask Siraj, what's the latest on Stefan Diggs? It's a hard question to answer because he didn't rehab here. He was in Houston with the team a couple of times. He was there for the Netflix game when there were all the cameras and stuff, and there was the Beyonce show, and then he showed up for the home playoff game. Don't know what, I didn't see him in Kansas City. Jalen Petrie, rehab. Now he's under contract. But you're asking what's up with Stefan Diggs? Don't know, because he didn't work out here. We never saw him in the facility once after he got hurt. So was he a good teammate when he was here? Yes. Was there leadership? Yes. Did it seem like perhaps things could have been going well? Yes. I don't know what's up with Stefan Diggs. I know he was with Cardi B on Valentine's Day, and he's put up some Instagram workout videos of him putting in some work. That's really all we know. Will, I am going to the combine. Trip got pushed back to Wednesday. Cody's already there. I'm going Wednesday, got pushed back. So I'll be there for the prospects that we want to keep an eye on, the tight ends, the wide receivers, etc. Flight got pushed back. Science got some personal stuff that I'm dealing with. Good stuff. But yeah, it was kind of out of my control. It was like a Monday, late Tuesday window ended up being Wednesday. So I'll be out there. That just kind of happens. But I'm good on Stefan Diggs. I'll get into this weird changing cities thing. I don't really know what exactly. I think it's being presented kind of weird. But we'll get into that in a sec. Will asks, do you think you could politely ask Nick if he's learned how to manage the cap better through his shortcomings? Sure. I mean, the handling of the cap is something that can come up. The good thing about the combine is that these guys are kind of walking around. I'm not like buddy with Nick. I'm good enough to where we talk for a couple minutes if we're just walking around, don't have anything to do. So I mean, the cap thing is not. I really think the management of the offensive line is more of a thing. Look, there's teams who draft poorly and they're able to overcome it for whatever reason. There's teams that spend bad money, they're able to overcome it. There's very few organizations that are just 100% well-oiled machines. There might be a couple of them. And the reality is those are the teams that you try to compare yourself to, but there's just a couple of them. Like the Lions, I think they have a shitty coach. I think they have a lot of talent. I think they had really good coordinators. I don't think they were able to. I think that their ceiling was extremely high. I think it was brought down because their coach in game didn't get the job done. He wins at the podium. They talk about this imaginary culture. I think the culture is the players. I think the Lions, they're going down. My point is, DeMeco Ryans has done a good job coaching, and they've been able to overcome the money. We'll see what it looks like when they can't be so reckless. Maybe they tighten their game up a little bit. But the whole point is they've kind of screwed that up. This is a good question by Sideline Sarah. Shout out to Sideline Sarah. A lot of good information that she puts out. She asks, if the Texans were to sign one veteran wide receiver, who would you want? Which brings us to the next two splashes. Because I think this is a good question. I'll say this, like the Darius Slayton stuff, I'm dismissing because I think that would be a significant overpay. I think that's like a Gabe Davis, who's another wide receiver who would get paid and then fall off the face of the cliff. There's a lot of examples. They pretty much happen every year, but I'm against like the Darius Slayton. I hear the Darius Slayton. I'm not good on that. First of all, I think they need to draft a wide receiver and they need to acquire one via trade or sign. The two names that we hear about the most are number one, Cooper Kupp. And I don't know what this trade looks like. I do wonder if the Rams are just going to go in a complete rebuild. And if Matthew Stafford ends up getting traded, let's be honest. At one point, they were saying F them picks. They're not going to be saying that anymore. The Rams are going to be in a complete rebuild where who knows how much dead cap they're going to have. It's probably going to be a godly amount. And who knows what they're going to be willing to do if they get to a point where they release Kupp or whatever. Who knows? But I think we're very close to the Rams kind of being in like somewhat of a rebuild. The other splash is Deebo Samuel. And Deebo Samuel, I think he's going to get released by San Francisco. Nobody's trading for Deebo. It just doesn't seem to make sense. They got receivers that they like. He wants out of there. They tried to get rid of him last year. Now they're trying to get rid of him. He looks fat. Deebo Samuel is the other splash. So you asked, like, which wide receiver would I want to sign? Which veteran of that? Stefan Diggs is on the very back. I think Cooper Kupp would be a good fit here. I don't think it's going to cost a lot. I think you can manufacture some money. I still think you draft a receiver. I still think you need speed, but I think with what Cooper Kupp can bring to the table, the ability that he has, the question marks are the question marks. They're kind of similar to what you have with Diggs. I do think, though, when we talk about Cooper Kupp, I've seen people just kind of add up the games that he's missed. When he missed the large chunk after the Super Bowl year, that was the year where they shut a lot of guys down. We saw it with Stingley and Pierce during the rebuild, and that was before they got CJ. They basically I think Stafford played less than a dozen games. I want to say it was close to 10. They shut that down, but he has had trouble staying on the field. But the production is solid, and they just happened to be in a position now, the Rams, where they have a guy who's better. They drafted a guy that's better. Puka Nacua is a better player than Cooper Kupp right now. Cooper Kupp was one of the best slot receivers in the league, and now Puka Nacua is. And the Rams are in a situation now where they're letting Matthew Stafford ask for trades. I mean, this is a team that kind of was going toe-to-toe with the Eagles. If it doesn't snow in that game, I think it might have been a different game. But the Rams are in a different situation. So it's kind of like it's not as much as Debo. I think Debo's just kind of fallen off. And I think I don't think he likes his place in San Francisco anymore. And there might be a little bit more to that. But I think Cooper Kupp still has some ball. I don't think this is just an example of they're getting rid of him. So if of the veteran options that we talk about the most, I like Cooper Kupp. I'm also okay with the bargain shopping. I'm okay with the bargain shopping when it comes to free agency. I think after the first run of wide receivers, I think there's going to be some guys on the market. I think some teams are going to wait till the draft to see what exactly is going on. Keenan Allen, we mentioned him. I don't think he's going to be an option. He's made over $100 million. He's made $130 million in his career. He's made $100 million as a player. I don't know that he really wants to leave Los Angeles. He's got 4 kids, met his wife in California. They've lived there the whole time. So I don't think that Keenan Allen would be someone that I would really be interested in. And then you have the Hollywood Brown type where Kansas City kind of waited and they got Hollywood Brown. But for me, it would be Cooper Kupp. That would be my thing. I don't think Keenan Allen's really an option. And I still think you go young, and I still think you bring in some of these bottom end guys. Someone says that Debo is hot garbage. Can't run a route to save himself. I mean, it was a gimmicky way that they were handling. Christian Kirk could be a cap casualty. I think he would be good. I think Christian Kirk's a solid guy, solid option. I think he's going to probably be in that Hollywood Brown range. And I think Christian Kirk, probably a little bit better version, but I think it's kind of similar where Hollywood Brown probably went into last year saying, man, I'm going to get me a 2-year, $30 million deal. I'm going to get me a 3-year, $40 million deal. Same situation. Seems like every wide receiver is full of draft picks. Not a lot of people dying to pay wide receivers. I know Calvin Ridley got his money, but the Titans are stupid. Christian Kirk could be that guy that you get on the 1-year deal, the prove it deal. And this is the place where guys are going to want to prove it. So there can be some options. I'm not opposed to the Christian Kirk idea. But if we're talking about the veterans and stuff, I would say that would be a good option. Should we go after Nick Chubb for what? You think he wants to be RB2? I don't think so. You got Joe Mixon. I think they need running backs, multiple running backs, but no. I would not do that. Ja'Cory Davis on the chat says, sometimes you just got to pick where your feet are at. Caserio has been good at trading back and making something out of it. Golden, a good option, in my opinion, after a trade back. Yeah, Golden's getting a lot of love. And I'll be honest with you, like I'm the biggest Texas football fan you'll ever meet at like a psychotic extreme level. That's where my parents met. When my parents got divorced, my dad took me on road trips to UT games. It's the bond between my father and I. My mom still texts me during game. I talk to my mom all the time, but like during games, that's the only time she's really pissed is during Texas games. I can go as far back as you want, 3 decades on Texas football. I'm not like the biggest Golden fan, though. I think he's a good player, but I didn't watch Golden and say, man, that's a first round pick. That's number 25. Now, I loved Adonai Mitchell last year, and I still think Adonai Mitchell's a really good player. I say all this to say I don't love every Texas player. Some people love, like, if there's a team that they root for in college, they love all the players. I'm not as big on Golden. I think Golden could be a good second rounder. I don't think I didn't watch him and say, man, this is a number 25 overall pick. I saw it with Mitchell. Now he had to go play with LaFar Jackson in Indianapolis, and that guy sucks. But I'm not as big on Golden as a lot of people are. A lot of people love Golden. I've seen some people talk about him being WR2, WR3, 1. I've seen it a lot. I'm not as big on Golden as a lot of people are. I like from Texas this year. I'm intrigued by Helm. I don't know when he's going to go. The tight end, number 85. And I like Jaden Blue. If y'all see me on Twitter cussing at Sark, I think Jaden Blue was very misused. Now, can he stay healthy and can he not fumble the ball? Who knows? But he was confident enough to roll out. I think he's a day 2 guy now. I don't think this is a sneak in the day 3. I think Jaden Blue is going to be a day 2 pick. So you're going to either have to have extra picks or you're going to have to feel comfortable enough that you're going to take a guy who can be a receiver running back. But I'm a big Blue guy. I don't think you can go wrong with either of the offensive linemen. Banks is he might be able to play guard early. If you want to play him at guard early. I don't think you have to. The other kid, a little bit more of a project. And then you have a bunch of other guys that you can look at, and there's nothing like too crazy. There's some solid players, but there's nothing like worth talking about at 25 outside of that. But I say all that to say, not really as big of a Golden fan. I knew T. Higgins' name would come up. My thing with T. Higgins is, I mean, that's going to cost pretty much all your prime draft equity, and it's going to cost, you're going to have to make him one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid wide receiver in the league. Why? That would be weird. I like T. Higgins as a player, but do I think he's one of the best wide receivers in the league? No. I think he's one of the best number 2 wide receivers in the league. Do I think that he's worth giving up prime draft equity for and doing that? No, I don't. That's what happens in free agency, though. You take guys who are really good number 2s or did a good job in certain situations, kind of up and down, and then you pay them heavily. When's the last time like an elite wide receiver in his prime even hit free agency? NFL is set up to where the really good players, and that's why the NFL is so popular, because they actually handle it like a real business and they handle it right. But when is the last time like an NFL wide receiver in his prime, coming off of his rookie deal, hits the market? It doesn't happen often. But you know what does happen? Like virtually every other offseason, that guy who hits the market becomes like the highest paid player at his position. So that's why this like free agency, and he's going to get tagged by Cincinnati, and then you're going to have to trade and you're going to have to figure it out. So I don't like what is like T. Higgins doesn't do anything for me. That would be one of the dumbest things that they've done. Like I would honestly put, if they traded draft equity for T. Higgins and then made him one of the highest paid wide receivers in the NFL, I would put that up there with the Titus Howard. I would put that above the Titus Howard and Shaq Mason extension, because you're preventing yourself from drafting and getting young players, which is the number one thing you can have, the opportunity to get young talent, especially in the prime selection. And you're paying a guy who's not one of the best wide receivers in the league like he's one of the best wide receivers in the league. Doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense to me. Cincinnati needed a crap ton of offensive line help when they drafted Jamar Chase. Crap ton. They were getting criticized. And they got him, and he's been the number 1. He's been unsolicited number 1 for a long time. Unquestioned, I should say. So I don't understand this whole T. Higgins thing. And I don't think it's like a big thing. I don't even understand that. Doesn't make sense to me. But we'll see what's going on with the Texans. Another potential splash, and this one's draft heavy. Be sure to subscribe, like, right along. It is the Locker Room. SNL tomorrow at 4. We'll be at the normal time. Stoots did something today that annoyed the living shit out of me. And I called him on it. And I just hate time zones. I don't mind if like during the radio days, or even like if you're trying to get someone on the stream, if you're talking to someone on the West Coast or you're talking to someone on the East Coast, I don't mind that person telling me, hey, yeah, I can't do it till 9 p.m. Central or Eastern or something like that. I get it. You're there, you're in New York, you're doing, wherever, Connecticut, whatever. That's fine. I can do it at 7 Pacific time. Someone in Las Vegas or California trying to get Britt Musburger or something on. Stoots literally landed in Indianapolis, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what time should we do SNL? And he's talking Eastern and all that type of crap. Like he's like some sort of like New Yorker. And I don't even think he'd gotten his bags yet from baggage claim. Just talk to me at the normal time that we do. Let's push it back to 6. Let's push it back to 5. Nah, we can still do 4 o'clock. This dude's talking to me about the time zones as if it's not just unnecessary and confusing. If we were both there, it would work. But our show is at 4 Central. That's the Texas time zone. And I got Stoots sitting here talking in like East Coast time zone language. I guess it made him feel cool because he was traveling. But my God. Come on, Stoots. Get it together. 4 o'clock tomorrow. And I hope he realizes that. Biggest splashes the Texans can make. Richard asks, there's been a lot of talk about the Texans changing cities. Is any of that true? I hope not. We'll get into that in a sec. I think that's been kind of a weird discussion. We'll get into it. Steve asks or says the McNair's gonna do the fans like Bud Adams did. I don't know what the hell that means. Like they're not moving, they're not changing the organization, and they're not moving. So we'll get into that. Want to get into some weird stuff though, and I see someone has like a ask me anything type of weird ass question that I'll get to in a sec. But the Jags' weird offseason continues. And I'm trying to figure out what is going on with the Jags. They hired the coach. I'm kind of hesitant to make fun of him because, quite frankly, he might be good. They hired a GM. I'm hesitant to make fun of him because, quite frankly, he might be good. So I'm not completely dismissing that. But the manner in which this whole process has happened, and that's going back to like the days when you had Trent Baalke probably should have been fired. They kept him around. Then they wanted Byron Leftwich. Then they didn't want Byron Leftwich. Then they hired Doug Peterson. Then Doug Peterson came in. Baalke remained. Peterson left. They kept Baalke around. They hired a head coach that apparently didn't want to work with Baalke. Once they fired Baalke, they then went back to that head coach. They gave him the job. He went to the podium. He said Duval and looked like a weirdo. Then they started a GM search. They started posting weird-ass pictures throughout the GM search. Suddenly, Tony Boselli is like a football guy. He's been like a broadcaster. He's suddenly like their football guy. And they introduced this general manager who's like some sort of boy wonder. He's in his 30s. There's all the like meat writers and the media types who are like all into agents and stuff. They're acting like, well, maybe he was the mastermind behind their drafts the last few years, which if he is, Texans might be in trouble. But there's all this stuff going on. And then they have this press conference to introduce this guy, this GM. And I'm like, okay, I want to check this out. And I just want to hear what this boy wonder has to say and what he sounds like. And I'm not even faulting the way he sounded, but let's just hear a little bit of it. This is from the Coach Speak Index. This is their press conference to introduce their general manager. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys up there. There are 6 guys up there at a GM press conference. This one right here, I thought he was in wrestling. I didn't even know he had anything to do with this whole thing. This guy's like that president, I think, who always talks about London and stuff and like their business guy. This is the new guy that they've appointed as like the God's gift to football. This is the coach who they've already introduced. This is the owner who picks and chooses when he talks. And the GM's right here. If you're introducing the general manager, shouldn't he at least be in the middle? He looks like a damn intern. He looks like Carl Douglas on the OJ Simpson Dream Team. And Carl Douglas talks a lot now, but back then it was like F. Lee Bailey, Robert Shapiro, Johnny Cochran, Barry Scheck, like all these dream guys. You can tell I'm a nerd for that shit. And Carl Douglas is just sitting there. This guy doesn't even look like he's the freaking GM. So let's just hear a little bit of what he had to say, courtesy of the Coach Speak Index. They took the best clips, but this is weird to begin with. Just put the GM up there with the damn owner and the coach and figure it out.
For Tony Baselli or Tony Khan, collaboration is a great buzzword, and I get it that's an ideal, being aligned. The last three coaching staffs here pointed fingers like I've never seen in my life at each other, the staff and the GM. Why do you think this is going to be different for Tony Baselli or?
They don't even know where to answer it. They don't even know where to answer the question. They're so confused. So look at these guys. Look how confused they are. That now there's a zoom in. Coach Speak is making fun of them. Like watch how confused they are.
For Tony Baselli or Tony Khan, collaboration is a great buzzword, and I get it that's an ideal, being aligned. The last three coaching staffs here pointed fingers like I've never seen in my life at each other, the staff and the GM. Why do you think this is going to be different?
I mean, what is Khan doing up there? What is he even like doing? Shouldn't Shad Khan be the one answering the questions? I don't understand that. Let's hear from this boy wonder, though, the guy that's buried in the corner. The reason they're having the press conference, despite the fact they have it looking like a effing Thanksgiving dinner. Let's hear from this boy wonder. Look at this guy. Look at that hair product right there. That's a once a week haircut guy right there. That's a once a week, and he damn sure is going to the same place. Let's hear what this boy wonder's got to say, though.
Look at what you bring to the table as cutting edge or outside the box, and what does that look like in today's NFL or from a GM spot?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think that, I have a fresh perspective, I'd say. A deep understanding of really the modern tools and mechanisms that are revolutionizing the sport. And so, that'll certainly be something that we leverage here. While at the same time, I mean, we're walking into the combine this afternoon, right? And so the current mode of operation is in rhythm. The cadence is in place. So my intent here through this initial spring is to really calibrate my own mode of operation to the current mode of operation, insert some specific efficiencies that'll help me better understand our group's insights and perspectives.
What in the hell is he talking about? This might be a fraud. This guy might be a fraud. That's press conference. So we'll see how it goes. But this might be fake.
This is fake. That's fake.
It's a fake.
Yeah, that's Photoshop. That's fake. On my mama, that's fake. On my heart, on my life, my little brother grave, I could die right now. That's fake.
All right. There's another minute of this answer, minute plus.
And then assess at the end of this spring what types of things we can roll out into the future. But we'll certainly, put the pedal to the metal on a lot of advanced sort of modes of operation.
You talked about a lot of things about the ever-changing landscape of the NFL, and then you talked about the mode of operation. But I assume you're hitting at analytics. Where can we go? I mean, obviously, Tony is.
I love this media, by the way.
But how much more is there?
The Jacksonville media is underrated, though. They'll hold the feet to the fire, and you can tell this kid just thought he could throw a word salad out there, and the journalist said, you know what? I'm gonna ask the follow up and figure out what the hell this kid's talking about. And you can see him. He's like, damn, this isn't in my notes. I used to do that. I remember back in college, you get the TI 83 plus calculator. I might be dating myself. Put the answers down there. Teacher calls on you. You kind of sneak a glimpse down to where you kind of got the formula. But whenever they call on you and it's something you don't have, I mean, that's the look right there. My man's like, damn, I don't have this one in the notes.
Found and had in the role of analytics in terms of building rosters and maybe even helping with the game management stuff.
Tony will be leveraged for sure. His insight and understanding is top tier. So that in and of itself is an
Tony
edge
Baselli?
that we can.
Tony Baselli's not an insightful guy. Like, I like Tony Baselli. I think he's smart. He's a meathead football player. Like, with that is like the edge of like alpha male meathead and dork that I enjoy. He's one of my favorite analysts when he did it. But if they're leaning on Tony Baselli to be there like, oh, we're going to lean on him. Maybe he lucks into figuring some stuff out. They're not in the worst situation. Like, this isn't like when Cleveland was trying to do money balling crap and they had no roster and they had Hugh Jackson and all that. Like, I think that, like I said, it's fun to make fun of Liam Cohen. He might end up being a really good coach. I'm not dismissing that possibility. And quite frankly, I'm hesitant to make fun of it because I think it could happen. But they're leaning on Tony Baselli because he's a bot. No, he's not. He's a meathead football guy. That's a dork. And I say dork in an endearing fashion. I like Tony Baselli. I know Seth Payne, who I used to work with, who I still talk to, who still does a good job on his channel, especially this time of the year. I think he's one of the best breaking down stuff in the trenches. I don't pretend to be an expert in that, so I lean on guys like Seth and John Harris. But Tony Baselli, he was teammates with Seth and stuff. Like, he's a dork. He's not like some sort of smart football guy. He's like a meathead, old school dork. So Tony Baselli is the guy that this guy's leaning on for analytics. This might be, there's a lot of times when you hire someone young because you really think he's a boy wonder and you really think he has potential. And then there's other times where you just hire him because you think you can walk all over him, or you don't want to pay as much, or because your assets are limited. And you end up with some dumbass overseeing an organization and overseeing a bunch of alphas that just kind of, he's able to be the shield for leaning on other people. You see, I see it in radio. Like, I see it in a lot of industries where if you want to be cheap at the general manager position, and for whatever reason, the Jags, they were very hesitant to get rid of Balky. You bring in this young kid who's not going to get this opportunity anywhere else. Maybe he is a boy wonder. Maybe they figure it out. But a lot of times it's just because he's a yes man. He's the cheapest and he's the easiest to control. And this kid, podium critic, not the end all be all, but podium critic. This is terrible.
And utilize. Beyond that, the biggest item that I can articulate at this stage and will for our staff is not that analytics is ever doing anything other than supporting our current mode of operation and the traditional ways in which we approach evaluations. Now, the fusion between the two is really what's important. Neither evaluations or data analytics outweighing either, but really supporting one another and being useful to one another in a way that, increases our efficiency just from an operational standpoint and helps us make more informed decisions.
All right. I don't know what the hell that was. Let's see if there's one more from this guy.
Wanted to ask you about sort of your philosophy of player identification. I saw somebody, Matt Miller, I think, tweeted something about pro-ready players versus traits players. Can you give a little deep dive into what you look for, particularly with college players, and what you will do to try to bring those guys who can fit into Liam's system right away?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. I think it's pretty simple from my perspective. We will prioritize people and players that are intangibly rich.
This kid ain't calling the shots.
By doing so, they will elevate our ecosystem, our team, by being nothing more than themselves.
He ain't calling the shots. I'll just be honest with you. That kid ain't calling the shots. Tony Baselli's running that organization, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, he gets to start with the number 5 overall pick, which is great. But that kid's not running things. That Tony Baselli is. Let's just be honest. That Tony Baselli probably doesn't want the smoke that comes with being a general manager. But I mean, there's a reason they were taking Tony Baselli's picture with all these kids. I don't think that was by design that they interviewed. Tony Baselli's this kid, I don't even need to know his name. And I don't even remember it. The GM of the Jags is Tony Baselli. And as someone who lived experienced and was as close to the Jack Easterby situation as anyone. Whenever you have a guy who is basically calling the shots behind the scenes and doing all types of stuff, and he doesn't have to be the guy that people actually criticize, I think it's just the ultimate chicken shit. And I told Easterby that before. That was one of my main things, one of my main objectives when I was on the air, just to make sure that the right guys got the blame. So let's just make this very clear. I'm not saying that it's not going to work. I think the Jags are close to the Texans. They're as close to the Texans as the Texans are to the Chiefs. Obviously, they had Trevor Lawrence go down last year, but the year before, they easily could have won the division. But let's just be clear. If the Jags are good and they make good offseason moves, it's because of Tony Baselli, Liam Cohen, whoever the hell else. This kid is just a cheap young hire. He is not the young prodigy. He is the yes man. Tony Baselli is calling the shots. Let's just be serious. There is nothing about that kid. This is not a Sean McVay situation where you find him young. This is a kid who might develop into it. He might be able to learn on the go. But this kid ain't calling the shots. If they're sitting in a draft room and Tony Baselli says one thing and this kid says another, Tony Baselli's getting the call. So that's the bottom line. I don't say all that to crap on the kid. I'm actually protecting the kid. But let's just make this very clear. This kid is like a organization or something that's functioning on a budget. They don't want to get a top-tier GM. They don't want to pay for a top-tier GM. And quite frankly, they have another guy who's calling the shots behind the scene and doing stuff that is going to have the final call anyways. Someone that's more established, they're not going to let Tony Baselli tell them what to do in the draft. This kid just said Tony Baselli's the source of analytics. We've listened to Tony Baselli for 20 years talk about football. There's nothing analytic about it. Matter of fact, I think he probably goes on rants about analytics. So let's just be clear. The blame with Jacksonville or credit goes to Tony Baselli. He's running that shit. They had 6 guys up there to mask this kid. And they still couldn't do it. They had 6 guys up there at a GM press conference. What was the point of that? 6 guys for a GM press conference? 4 would have been a lot. Maybe would have been appropriate. If Com wants to go up there with Baselli, Cohen, and the kid, but that's crazy. That's crazy. That's one of the worst press conferences I've ever seen. And you could tell they thought it was kind of they thought it was kind of trash too. That was weak. Talking about in the chat the first time, I don't consider them having a first time OC because I think Cohen's calling plays. So I think that's, like Matt Burt, DC of the Texans. All right, sure. He's there. He helps. He does a good job with the D-line, but Cohen's calling plays. So I don't know that I look at it as that. But Jacksonville's in an interesting spot. They've had a really interesting offseason. That kid's not calling the shots, though. Let's just be serious. DeRhino says, sounds like the BS I tell my wife when I'm trying to get out of trouble. Well, then you must stay in damn trouble. Because if that's your game to get out of trouble with the wife, Rhino, man, you stay in trouble, my man. Because that dude couldn't talk his way out of a speeding ticket going 2 over. That was bad. That was bad. He's just rattling off corporate buzzwords. Yes, he is. Very clear. This is a good comparison. Way to localize it, Orange Drink. Man, that McDonald's orange went so hard too. Tony Baselli going to work out as well as Jeff Bagwell. That's what this feels like. This kind of feels like a Jeff Bagwell situation. I would say that's a really, really good comparison where you find the guy. Now, there's obviously differences because the Astros had established a championship roster, culture, all that type of stuff. The Jags had kind of just let someone just piddle around for a long time in Balky, and then they went to Baselli. But yeah, it does have a Jeff Bagwell vibe. But this kid's just a mask. He's a disaster. He's all the corporate buzzwords. He's going to leverage the collective efforts of the organizational stakeholders with the targeted approach for blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there's nothing worse than a fake corporate buzzword presentation. It sucks. Especially like the PowerPoint leadership where all of a sudden they go up there and they talk. I mean, like it's like, well, what is our brand and what do we talk about? And, it's not this, it's that, da, 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 blah, 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 blah. And then they'll kiss the ass of someone they bring in who's their buddy. They're probably laundering money. It's a disaster. Hey, they talk about like technology that they have no idea about. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it sucks. Not fun. But yeah, just thought we would touch on the Jags. The splash in the draft, Tyler Warren or Loveland. Could we see the Texans trading up for a tight end? That's really the only realistic splash I could see. I could see them taking an edge guy. I could see them even taking a linebacker. I could see them taking a safety at 25. I could see that happening. That would be more of a surprise than a splash. If they are going to make a splash, I would think trading up for Warren or Loveland would be possible, or maybe Loveland falls to them. I think that's going to be one of the interesting things. But we talked about, signing Diggs and the wide receivers, and maybe signing Smith. Those are the splashes there. But outside of that, I don't see too much draft craziness. I think they might stockpile picks and go the other way as opposed to trading up. Will asks in the chat, if you got put into a spaceship towards Mars and could only bring 3 movies, what movies are you bringing? Damn, that's a good question. I don't know. 40-year-old virgin for sure. 40-year-old virgin, no doubt. Damn. Oh, no, definitely 40-year-old virgin. Maybe CB4. And then I guess Shawshank, although do you want to watch Shawshank all back? Like you're not going to laugh. It's kind of dramatic. I like Shawshank, but is it really something it's not funny? Scarface. Yeah. Scarface. I know a lot of people are Godfather. I would go Scarface. So I would go Scarface, CB4 and 40-year-old virgin would be the 3 that I could, that I would bring, if I went in a spaceship. So Combine, again, my arrival's late Wednesday. Was going to be there tonight. Science, some stuff I got going. All good, though. Everything's good. Everything's great. Actually, everything's excellent. So it's not like anything scary, just exciting stuff. So I'll be there. Cody's going to be there tomorrow. We'll do SNL at 4:00. Screw that time zone crap that Cody's talking about. And I appreciate y'all for coming through. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like. Be sure to ride along. Be sure to remember, number 1, Tony Baselli is the one calling the shots in Jacksonville. And number 2, and most importantly, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Appreciate y'all for coming through.
The city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localized every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not 2. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days, opinions to give, we got takeaways. If it's up, then it's up. We number 1. You don't need to try your luck. Locker room, yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize, every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too.